on, then the light will be.
Yep, so just
Good afternoon. It is 3 o'clock, a little after 3 o'clock. We're going to go ahead and start the November 18th, 2020 meeting of the Urban Design Commission. This is our first in-person meeting since February 26, 2020. My name is Lee Peoples and I'm the chair of the commission. I'd like to go over the public meeting guidelines for in-person meetings during the COVID-19 pandemic. Masks are required throughout City Hall and during public meetings. To enter City Hall, you must use the south entrance. To exit City Hall, you can use the north, east, or south entrances. The west entrance is closed. To exit, you need to push the green button. Every other pew is taped off and only 3 individuals can sit on an open pew. Seating is marked on those pews. Families will be allowed to sit together. Accommodations for overflow will be provided on the 3rd floor lobby and if needed, the 2nd floor lobby. Wipes and sanitizers are provided on the podium and at the table outside. The chamber will be closed and cleaned and sanitized every day. The press box is limited to 7 media members. When people come up to the microphone, staff will be cleaning that in between speakers, so I would ask you to give staff a little space and not congregate or rush up there. Give them a second to clean that. When called on, applicants and speakers will come to the podium to speak. Only one person at a time should come to the podium. Speak into the microphone, please. If you come to the podium, please keep your mask on. The capacity in council chambers is 33 people. If we reach that number, there is overflow seating in the lobby outside the chambers. If overflow seating is utilized, we'll ask the audience to wait in the lobby for their case to be heard so that applicants can come into the council chambers and leave when the review of their case is complete. If you parked in the Sheridan Walker garage north of John Rex School, staff can give you a validation ticket. The agenda and the documents for the meeting today are located on PrimeGov. Once you go to PrimeGov, you can click on the agenda item and the relevant documents will come up. Jennifer, would you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Peoples.
Here.
Commissioner Uday.
Here.
Commissioner Blatt.
Here.
Commissioner Charneko.
Here.
Commissioner Guillory.
Here.
Commissioner Holmes. Commissioner Milner. Commissioner Nguyen. Commissioner Varnum.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. First item of business is the approval of the minutes of the September 23rd, 2020 meeting. Are there any corrections to these minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion by Blatt,
Second.
second by Charneko. And we should be able to vote. Please cast your votes. Okay, those minutes are approved. We have no cases withdrawn. We have no continuance requests. We do have an item on the consent docket. This is UDCA 2030, 711 North Dewey, and I'd ask staff to introduce this item, please.
Because staff has reviewed it against the applicable development standards and design guidelines and found that it is complete compliance with all the applicable rules and regulations for development on this site. Therefore, we place it on the consent docket for your consideration, and the commission may either call it off consent docket to discuss it or approve the consent docket in whole.
If anyone would like to move this to individual consideration, we certainly would do that. I would ask staff, I did read in the staff report that we had previously approved a project for this several years back for this address.
Yes, there was a triplex development approved on this lot before. I think it was 2015, and the project was by the same applicant, just for your information. And they decided not to pursue that development at that time, and that CA is now expired.
Okay. Commissioners, any discussion or anybody want to move this to individual consideration? Not hearing anything. If anybody would like to move approval.
I'd like to move approval of the consent docket.
We have a motion by Blatt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Chernico. Go ahead and cast your votes, please. Okay, that item, the consent docket is approved. Now we move on to cases for individual consideration.
You said 5 to 4.
I'm sorry,
You said 5 to 4. Was that, can
Oh.
you see what that said again?
the vote. No, let me ask, staff, could you give us the vote, please? Oh, okay, we're having some trouble voting here.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to call the aye votes for that?
Yeah, let's have a roll call vote, please. Would you like us to vote again? Okay, well, now it's showing that all commissioners voted in favor. Are we good? Okay. Okay, the consent docket was approved with all 6 members voting in favor. We'll now move on to cases for individual consideration. 6A, UDCA-20-28, 628 Northwest 23rd Street.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this is an item that is at 628 Northwest 23rd Street. It's an existing structure, originally built as a single-family residence, I believe in the early 1900s, 1910. It's been used as a residence, I think converted to a duplex, and has been vacant for, I guess, a period of time. And this is a little bit of an example of what happens when we have a little bit of a mix-up on the building permit. Apparently, Development Services initially issued a building permit for the work on the project. There's some confusion about whether or not that permit was for exclusively interior work or exterior work, but the bottom line is the work that was started did proceed to the exterior of the building, and at that time, the applicant was cited for not having a certificate of approval to do the exterior work. We've reviewed the project as submitted on the plans in front of you in the packet, and there are a few issues associated with this that I want to go over with you that are detailed in the staff report. The first item is there is an 8-stall parking lot existing on the ground today on the eastern side of the property. The only way to access those 8 stalls is through the adjacent surface parking lot on the property to the east. For those stalls to be legal, those 8 stalls to be legal on this property, there needs to be a cross-access agreement to show the legal right to access those 8 stalls from the adjacent parcel. We were unable to obtain a copy of the cross-access agreement for those stalls, and as a consequence, the 8 stalls on the site, along with asphalt that sits underneath them, must be removed from the project before they can proceed, because they're not legally accessible without that agreement in place. Secondly, some of the work that was initiated with the project was they have removed 2 dormers that were on the site or on the roof of the building, one in the north side, one on the south. The one on the south was essentially not visible from street level, either from the adjacent side street or from 23rd. And we, as staff, has agreed that the applicant should not have to rebuild that dormer. However, we are in favor of making sure that the dormer that was removed on the north side of the building that faces Northwest 23rd Street does get rebuilt and rebuilt in as close to the same proportions as the existing dormer, or the formerly existing dormer was on that facade. Additionally, a landscape plan is required for this project. We did not receive that landscape plan from the applicant in time for consideration at this meeting. We feel that's an administrative level type of an approval that staff can review once it is submitted by the applicant, and we can take care of getting that landscape plan approved per code as a part of the approval through the condition of approval we've listed for the commission. Another item that was noted is that the siding, the existing wood siding on the building has deteriorated and has a lot of mold in it. And for that reason, the applicant has proposed to replace the wood siding. We've seen some submittals from the applicant with respect to the spec sheet on the replacement material for the wood siding, but we haven't been able to zero in on the exact dimension of the planks that would be used and so on and so forth. So we've also added that as a condition of approval for administrative review and approval after the fact that the commission may or may not approve this certificate of approval. And again, we've seen encouraging signs that they're on the right track for the right material, but we haven't zeroed in on it yet. So we're confident that that can be addressed administratively by staff. And then the third item is the spec sheet on the windows. Per the elevations that are in your packet, the sizes and proportions and locations of the windows are identical to the existing window placement on the building, and we are supportive of that, of course, but we have not yet seen the exact details of the types of windows that would be used to replace the existing ones. And per the guidelines that are in the building conservation rehabilitation guidelines that are listed out for you in your staff report, we've advised the applicant that the windows that he uses to replace the existing windows would need to be as close to a replication of the current window style and design that is in the windows that are there today. So, and we've discussed these three conditions with the applicant. He is supportive of all three conditions. I do want to note that all three conditions are tied to the release of the certificate of approval. So normally, if the commission were to approve the certificate of approval today, there would be a 10 business day appeal period that would be, and the CA would not be released to the applicant until the end of that 10-day appeal period. With these three conditions, what we're suggesting to the commission and to the applicant is that the release of the certificate of approval will not happen until all three of these items are addressed and approved according to the code and the guidelines that are applying to these three items. So they could, of course, attempt to resolve all three of those issues in the 10 business day appeal period and still get their certificate of approval at the same time. However, if they aren't resolved at that time, the CA will be held until such time as all three issues are resolved, and then that will result in a hold on the building permit until that CA is finally issued. I want to make sure the commission and the applicant are both aware of that. That completes our presentation, and we're prepared to respond to any questions that the commission may have.
So Michael, let me just clarify, if we do decide to approve it with these conditions, you're saying that automatically the CA won't be released until those items are received. There's not anything we need to add to the motion or anything like that.
The way the conditions are written, it talks about that the review and approval would happen prior to the release of the certificate of approval. So I don't think there's anything else you need to add.
I thought so. I just wanted to make
Right.
sure. Okay. Any questions for staff on this? Is the applicant here? If you'd like to speak, please come up and give us your name and address.
My name is Hunter Denton, at 628 Northwest 23rd Street. I don't really have anything else to add, other than with the windows. We originally purchased the windows on the initial of what Mr. Philibrick was saying, of the initial permission that we were given, and so we're not able to return those windows, which is going to be kind of an issue for us.
Do you have, he mentioned the cross-access agreement to get access to the parking spots. Do you have that agreement in place with the?
No, sir.
Okay. Are you talking with them or with the adjoining property owner? Are there any plans to try to make that happen?
I can look into it a little bit more. As far as I understood, that there weren't any parking requirements in that area, so that's kind of what I was going off of. Yes, sir. Okay.
Well, let me just ask you about a little more about that parking. In our staff report, it says that if you don't have that agreement, you have to remove the asphalt. So do you plan to do that?
Yeah, the plans that you have in your packet show the parking stall removed.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Reference the dormer on the north side. I know it was discussed and it's probably intended to be. Is there any issue with rebuilding the dormer per staff recommendations?
No, sir.
Okay.
And do you mentioned the windows, that you don't want to purchase new windows, obviously. What about the siding? Are you willing to provide the detail that staff asked about on the siding?
So my contractor originally sent the spec sheet to Mr. Philibrick. I'm not sure, I don't really understand the details of that, but as far as he was saying, it doesn't meet his requirements. It wasn't detailed enough. Am I getting
Yeah,
that right?
we received a spec sheet from the manufacturer on the wood siding replacement material. However, that plank material came in, I think, 4 or 5 different sizes, and they just didn't specify which size they were going to use. So once we had that specification, we can compare it to what's on the building today and make sure it matches up, and we should be fine.
Okay.
I'm still a little bit confused on the windows. Are you saying that you are in agreement with the conditions to submit specs for new windows that meet the staff's guidelines, or is that something that you've taken issue with?
What I was saying on the windows is we had already purchased the windows based on what we had been told before. Our issue is that, we can't return them. And so we're going to lose out on that aspect based on the information we were given before. And we sent a spec sheet to Mr. Philibrick, and I believe he said that they do look okay, if I'm remembering correctly.
The
They
current
look
windows that
okay
you've
in
already
the
purchased look,
elevation. They look okay in the elevations we've been provided, and by that I mean only okay. We don't have enough detail to say one way or the other. I have not seen anything that shows me what the actual windows that were purchased look like, so.
but there is a chance that the windows that they've purchased would be acceptable.
There's a chance, yes. There's also a chance they would not be.
Any other questions from the commission? Are there any members of the public here that would like to speak on this item?
I do have one more question. The approval that was initially given, that was done with no fault of the applicant, correct?
Correct. As far as we could tell.
You're talking about the approval from the
The building permit
permit
that was
desk.
issued up.
Yes.
okay.
And if I'm following, this
There
is,
was a mix-up. We can't tell where the mix-up was.
well, I'm just having a little bit of a hard time if it's going to result in the applicant having to purchase new windows for an approval that he thought he rightfully received.
Understood.
So my understanding from what we first saw entered in our electronic system that tracks applications was that it was initially entered as an interior remodel. I don't know where exactly in that process someone realized it wasn't interior, or if it was just, whose fault it was that it wasn't made clear all along the way that exterior work was involved, not only interior work. But yes, it was initially approved for an interior remodel and then came to us as we realized there was exterior work going on as well.
Would you normally consider windows, say I wanted to replace the windows, is that automatically considered an exterior renovation?
When a property is in a design review district, that should trigger, a stop from plan review that says you're touching the outside of the building, you're removing an exterior feature, you need to go get a CA.
You mind if I comment?
Yeah, please.
So I'm just representing for my contractor. He's got COVID, so he couldn't be here. He said, I asked him to walk me through it today, and he said that originally when he called down, he asked, for permission to start the renovation and demolition, and he said, I believe he submitted the plans that we wanted to do, and he said, yes, you have permission to go ahead and start, and it looks like you're not under the urban design district. He said you're in a pink zone, and I don't know what that means, but basically said you shouldn't be under their guidelines. I'd heard that he did list in the computer that it was interior, but according to my contractor's word, he said I would never have started on an exterior aspect of it if I hadn't been given permission.
Do you know if the scope of work that was identified at the permit desk included the windows at the time that he submitted that permit?
I believe so. I can't be 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure because we had an architect draw up our deal, and that's what he gave to him.
Is there any way to go into the system and, maybe not right now, I'm not asking you to do it on the fly, but would the permit system show if that was?
They'll have record of what's been submitted and what, any revisions that were made, so we would be able to access what's been turned in and approved at various points.
Michael, in page 4, it looks like there's a mix of windows. Is that the case? When I look at the bottom photograph of page 4, it looks like there's at least two different, I'm sorry, on your handout.
Okay. I only have
So
three
it's
pages.
the one with the photographs.
Oh,
It's,
the photographs, okay. Okay.
so the bottom photograph of page 4, at least from what I'm seeing on the screen, it looks like at least two different types of windows. Is that the case? Have the windows previously been replaced, and is it a hodgepodge?
I think that it's fair to say that there have been windows replaced on this building since the original windows.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you, Michael.
It's fair to say that there have been windows replaced on this building since the original windows.
So there is
there probably is a mix.
some inconsistencies, okay.
I know we don't have a spec sheet, but can you tell us anything about the windows that you've already purchased? Are they wood windows? Are they open and closed? Are they commercial? What's,
They, honestly, I couldn't give you a very good detailed, but I believe they're metal. They're double pane. I believe they open. My wife could probably give a better description.
I just want to make a comment on my thought process so that if I have any of this wrong, staff can correct me, but I'm having a hard time leaving the applicant with the burden of condition C, given that it doesn't appear that he's, due to negligence or due to any type of malicious intent, that he purchased these windows prior to having this approval, especially in the environment that we're in right now. I know that there are significant lead times and delays on ordering windows. So I'd hate to see their project delayed further in the event that they had to purchase new windows. Not to mention the fact that they've already got this cost that they can't be refunded for. So if I'm missing something, I would like to be aware of that, but that's sure how it appears right now.
Is the set that we have, it says permit set at the top, is it the permit set that we're looking at in our set? Is the set of plans that we are looking at the set that was submitted for permit? Or is it?
As far as I understand.
Because if this is the set, it comments on removing windows, existing plan, doors, windows, and other demolition is shown dashed. So all the windows are shown dashed. The plan calls out for window sizes on the plan. The elevation doesn't specifically call it out. So if this is what was submitted, then I think that this document shows that the intent was windows were going to be replaced as a part of this project.
There's a stamp down in the corner, Planning Department, November 3rd.
Yep.
But that's submitted to
Oh, to
this
us.
body
Okay, sorry.
here.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this document
Yeah.
is the same one that was submitted at the time of.
Commissioner Blatt? Yeah, the plan in your packet is not what was submitted at building because it's been revised at least twice since the CA was submitted. Now, I probably have the original submittal for the CA here in my project folder, and it may show you, it may be the same as what was submitted for the building permit, but I have no way of being able to verify that here today.
Unfortunately, I don't know either. My contractor was doing that.
I understand.
Any other questions or discussion among the commission? Well, not hearing anything. If anybody would like to make a motion, we have a staff recommendation here with several conditions.
I've got a question for council. In the event that staff was able to find that the windows were submitted to be replaced, can that be a condition? Can we comment on that specifically in the way the motion is addressed?
Yes, I think you could put that in your condition.
Okay. Then I'd make a motion to approve the application on the basis that the project meets the regulations and guidelines of the Urban Design Overlay District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant shall submit a landscape plan for administrative review and approval by staff prior to the release of certificate of approval, that the applicant shall submit a specification sheet for the exterior siding materials, including the dimensions, for administrative review and approval by staff prior to the release of the certificate of approval. And the applicant shall submit a specification sheet for all proposed replacement windows, and the building elevations shall be modified as necessary to properly illustrate the selected replacement windows for the administrative review and approval by staff, with the exception that if the original permit documents stated that the windows were going to be removed and reinstalled, and new windows were going to be installed, and that was approved by the permit desk, that the windows can remain as purchased. And that all of that information gets reviewed by staff prior to release of the certificate of approval.
Are you clear on that? Okay, very good. We have a motion. Do you have any other discussion or a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a second. Before we vote, any final discussion? All right, cast your votes. And it is passed with all 6 voting in favor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We now have other business, item 7A, a presentation from the Development Department.
Everybody in quite some time. Lisa Chronister, Assistant Planning Director, and here to update you on our development codes project, specifically the proposed new sign code. I wanted to come to all of the design review committees in November and December, because we're going to open up a public comment period on a draft of the code in starting December 7th. And then our plan is to come to all of the design review committees in January and February, so that we can be at Planning Commission and Council in March and April. So some of my presentation may be, you may remember hearing portions of it at the commissioner training we did in January. So I'll talk about, what the project is, why we're doing it, how we got to this point, some of the resources and information we had going into it. I'll talk about why we're working on sign code right now. I'll discuss key aspects of the new code that I want you to be aware of, and then go over the schedule. So the purpose of the project was to implement planokc. You probably remember that the new comprehensive plan was adopted in 2015, and the whole purpose of planokc was to improve the type of development that we get all over the city. And so to implement planokc means making various changes to the Planning and Zoning Code, which is Chapter 59, and portions of the sign code, the subdivision regulations, and drainage and nuisance codes. So it's been a long process to this point. There are several years ahead of us. So right now we're at the top of Phase 2 by updating the sign code. In the past few years, we've done a code diagnosis, which I'll go over in more detail in a minute. And then as soon as we're finished with the sign code, we'll get into the meat of revisions to the rest of the code. And we've already been working on that in the background, but we'll begin it in a more robust way in 2021. So the Phase 1 code diagnosis, we had a consultant who met with various stakeholders. Some of you may remember being in those meetings, but it found that almost nothing about our current code was working. Lots of outdated regulations that needed to be brought up to best practices standards, because things were so hard to find and interpret and enforce in the existing code, that there was overuse of PUDs as a tool to get what developers wanted. Things like outdated parking regulations and subdivision standards. All of that was determined in this Phase 1. And Phase 1 recommended that we move to a more graphic and user-friendly layout, that we look at form-based zoning for certain parts of the city and update our conventional zoning for other parts of the city. One thing it recommended relative to sign standards was to get to content-neutral standards. I'll talk about more of that in a minute. So for Phase 2, we hired a separate consultant, White and Smith Planning and Law Group. You heard from Mark White at our commission training in January. And the guiding principles for our Phase 2 work have been that, whatever we do, whatever the end result is, it has to be user-friendly. It has to have a broad support from everybody using it, from the developers, from the design community, that it had to make it easy to do really good development. It needed to be up to speed with all the latest best practices across all issues. It needed to be something that could be effectively enforced and clearly presented in a way that everybody can follow. So earlier this year, earlier in 2020, Planning Department was asked to accelerate the revisions to the sign code. Why? You may remember or have been aware of some contentious Planning Commission and City Council hearings related to billboards, one on Hefner Parkway, one on Memorial, some on 39th Street, I-44. So the applications raised the questions of, well, where are billboards allowed, under what circumstances? And in response to that, the City Council passed a moratorium on approving billboards that were put forth as part of a PUD. And that moratorium extends now through May of 2021. The industry and the sign companies all had the same questions as the neighbors and the applicants. What are the rules for billboards? Where are they appropriate and where are they not? There are also specific planokc policies related to signs, and many of those were based on a pretty thorough community appearance survey we did to inform planokc. So planokc included several specific policies related to signs. One, it just said broadly that we needed updated new signage regulations, and that specifically these regulations needed to look at reducing sign clutter, improving sign aesthetics, restricting new billboards or at least eliminating the number of existing ones. And it also asked us to look at the limits of the size, the height, and the number of signs. The Phase 1 code diagnosis also made specific recommendations relative to signs, such as doing a highly graphic format it's easy to read, content neutral sign standards. Right now, the existing sign code is largely organized around the definition of accessory signs and non-accessory signs. Accessory signs are signs that have content related to the use or activity that's on the site. And non-accessory signs are related to other activity, typically that's advertising, that's not, stuff that's not happening on the site. So, but content neutral sign standards, that's a First Amendment issue of which there has been more and more case law related to. And then again, can we get to a more, if you've thumbed through our existing chapter 3, you have to go back and forth between pages and tables to try to figure out what you're allowed. Can we simplify that process? So if we can't regulate signs by content, then what can we regulate them by? Well, lots of things. We can still regulate where they go on the site, how many are allowed, how big they are, how many there are, whether or not they light up and make noise or move. We can regulate what type of sign they are. So lots of things to be regulated other than by message. To inform the new sign code, we held multiple focus groups with a lot of different stakeholders. We met with developers, architects, real estate brokers. Some of you, I think, might have participated in those. We also worked with the stakeholder advisory team that was appointed by the mayor's office. The SAT is made up of architects, planning commissioners, developers, people who work in development and who know what the issues are. Their role is as a technical advisory role to inform us of what they thought could work and should work in the new code. We also had meetings with the policy committee, which is a subcommittee of the SAT. The policy committee is made up of the city council members and planning commission members who participate as part of the SAT. And they were valuable for helping staff determine, really what was actually feasible when it got down to, hey, this is in front of us for a vote, what are we hearing from constituents, and what have we heard from the SAT, what do we think can really happen. So with planokc, with the code diagnosis, with all of the groups we've been meeting with, and we have finally a draft of the new code. So the new code will take everything out of Chapter 3, Article 5, and it will move it to a new Article 16 in Chapter 59. So that's the short story. Of course, it's not quite that simple. It's not quite as simple as moving it because it's currently organized around accessory and non-accessory, and we are not organizing it that way. Because the new code is going to regulate signs by physical features, location, type, size, design. It's going to regulate signs by the type of street it's on, whether it's on a neighborhood street or an arterial or a freeway, and by the type of site zoning it has. If you're a industrially zoned property on an arterial, you're allowed certain signage. If you're a multifamily property on a commercial lot, then you have different provisions for signage. It condenses all of these regulations into tables, so you can go to the table for freestanding signs, read across on your zoning, and read down on your street typology, and find out how much signage you're allowed, how big it can be, and how many you're allowed. And I'll show you an example of that later in the presentation. along with highly graphic examples to communicate exactly the intent. So the new code will live online. There'll be a website, and you'll click, if you're looking at your regulations, you'll click View Our Codes. So the big picture relative to Urban Design Commission is, many provisions have not changed but have moved. Now everything is defined as one of 5 types of signs. Again, when the ordinance comes to you, you'll see that we've touched various other sections to remove this distinction between accessory and non-accessory. All of the, Bricktown's sign standards are the only ones of all the design review districts that all of their sign standards live in Chapter 3 right now. So all of Bricktown's standards are being moved over to this new Article 16. For districts like downtown, that downtown is its own base zoning, downtown code section 7200 has specific sign standards, and those are not changing because they're living in their own section, and we're not touching those. But districts like Urban Design and Riverfront are overlay districts. So the signage for the underlying zoning may be changing in this update, but nothing about the overlay. But nothing about the overlay zoning is going to change, and the overlay zoning will supersede the underlying zoning, just like it does now. For example, Urban Design Commission, in most cases, signage is allowed at 10% of the wall area, regardless of what kind of street it's on, and that will remain the same. Another thing that will directly affect Urban Design Commission is a new process for murals. For several years, the Arts Commission, Office of Arts and Cultural Affairs, and some subcommittees have been working to achieve a simpler, more predictable, more streamlined murals process. And the way we propose to do that in the new code is to require a sign permit, which is currently already required, and to require a CA if you're in a design review district, but Arts Commission approval will no longer be required. So we're also going to provide for expanded administrative review so that staff will be able to approve more murals. So this, by removing one of the 3 review steps, this should speed up the process and make it less expensive, both in terms of time and money. Since a lot of the murals will be eligible for staff review, the whole process should be quicker instead of waiting for the monthly meeting. We'll include allowances for text, which there already are. We'll keep those and improve those. Murals right now are identified as a conditional use. There'll be a permitted use, and there'll be standards for those uses. Again, not relative to content, but relative to placement on the wall, relative to the function of the building, things like that. So any questions so far? I know it's a lot. I probably deal with the sign code for 6 out of 8 hours every day, so I can't imagine what it is like to be absorbing it for the first time. So specific issues I wanted to point out that we are proposing relatively major changes are to pole signs, the way signs are measured, EMDs, how signs are addressed in PUDs, and billboards. So of these, I think pole signs and the way signs are measured have the most impact on urban design districts. The other 3 issues almost never come up in UDC, but I wanted you to be aware of them. So pole signs, the current draft recommends prohibiting pole signs. So that would be the most obvious visual difference you would see from the new code. For example, I'm thinking of the Canes at 23rd and Penn. It has 2 pole signs. If it were approved under the new code, those 2 pole signs would be monument signs. The new Starbucks at 23rd and Robinson that was just approved, it has 1 or 2 pole signs. Those would be monument signs. The way signs are measured is going to change quite a bit, but we think we've made it simpler. This is an example of the chart I was describing earlier, where across the top you find your zoning district. Across the left-hand bar, you look up what type of street you're on. Then you read across on the table to see what you're allowed. For the most part, these area limits are based on best practices regarding traffic speeds and readability. And to the extent we could, they are very similar to the thresholds currently allowed. Sign size, again, will be relative to the size of your building. The bigger the building you have, the more signage you're allowed. That makes sense. If you're on a busier street, you're allowed bigger signage. That makes sense too, right? All of the heights are proposed to be reduced, and they're also relative to the type of street, whether you're on a heavily trafficked street or a more quiet street. Measurement is also going to be defined as, instead of the simple rectangle that is used now, there'll be a multi-sided polygon that should give us businesses and sign companies more flexibility in getting the type of sign that they want. Because some people feel that in a rectangle, they have a lot of leftover space that is counting against their allowance. But this will let them tighten that up. So EMDs, the changes have been to permit EMDs for non-residential uses in residential districts. That's like churches, libraries, schools. Those are all located in residential districts, and they all often have a need for an EMD sign, and now their only avenue is to get a variance. And then the brightness and operating hours for commercial uses near residential, those will be tightened up to make it more neighborhood friendly. Then PUDs, the biggest change here is that you won't be able to use planned unit developments or simplified planned unit developments. You won't be able to use those to change the allowance of signs, to change what you're allowed to do in terms of signs. You'll have to comply with what the base zoning already allowed, because PUDs and SPUs, that should limit the use of those for that purpose. And as part of that, if you do want to vary what you're allowed, you have to do that as part of a coordinated overall view of your site in terms of how many signs and where they're going and what they look like. I noticed earlier when I was reviewing this, the second bullet, prohibit billboards in C3 and CHC. That should actually be on this next slide. So currently, billboards are allowed under certain conditions in C3 zoning and CHC zoning. That would be removed. They wouldn't be allowed. They would only be allowed on freeways, except for scenic corridors. We have one existing scenic corridor now. It's I-40, most of I-40 between 235 and I-44. The new sign code proposes 2 other scenic corridors, one being Hefner Parkway from its beginning at I-44 all the way to 164th. and then a section of I-35 from Northeast 10th to Northeast 63rd. We're also proposing to increase the spacing of billboards. We're setting up a system that if you want to install a new billboard, you technically would be moving an existing one, and you would have to completely remove another one. So with all of these, with these 5 different approaches, that should overall lead to a reduction in billboards over time. So, like I said, so the past week and a half, the Stakeholder Advisory Team and some sign industry partners have been reviewing, kind of the pre-first draft. They've been reviewing and commenting on it. We're going to incorporate all their comments and put out a refreshed version for public comment on December 7th. And then come back to design review, Planning Commission, City Council. So again, I wanted to, because we're on such a short time frame in January, February, I wanted to meet with you now so that you're aware, and when the public comment period comes out, we'll make sure you know when the draft is available online to review, because my request is that when I see you again in January or February, you'll have already made yourselves familiar with the new sign code and have asked any questions before the meeting. So with that, I will open it up to questions. I will proactively say that even I am still learning all the provisions of the new code, so if I can't answer your question, I will look it up and get back to you.
You've done such a good job explaining it, I don't think there are any questions.
Thank you. I explain it a lot, so I'm glad it's been clear. But at any time, if you have questions, please contact me. If you are out and about with your network and developers and industry partners, if they have questions, please refer them to me. We want to make sure that everybody is fully informed with what we're proposing.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
So next item on the agenda are communications. Item 8A, we have 4 of these. And these have already been approved. Just if any commissioners want any discussion of these, please ask staff about that. Okay, moving on to item 8B, any comments from planning department staff?
Nothing to report. Thank you all for your patience today with our technology and getting this worked out. I think it went relatively smoothly, so we appreciate all of your time this afternoon.
Item 8C, comments from commissioners. I want to thank the staff for making the Zoom meetings work from home, and you may realize this, but the reason we're here is because of the state legislature, not because of the city. So they could hold an emergency session and we could go back to Zoom or not. So anyway, I just want to thank the staff for all their hard work, both at home and back to the new normal. Any other comments from commissioners? Okay, our next meeting is Wednesday, December 16th, and we are adjourned. Thank you.
If you all will just close out of PrimeGov, we will come around and do everything else that needs to be done with the computers. Thanks again.